think so. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishpad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Shatashish Maharaj Vangra Saints Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Shatashish Maharaj Vangra Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Imunamai Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Can I get the book? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, thanks. So this morning we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, entitled The Creative Impetus. And we're in chapter 9, the Supreme Character of Jad Bharat, and we're on text 4. If you'd like to.
Tasyapi hava atmajasya vipraha puta snehanubaddhamana asama vartanat sanskaran yatopadesham vidadhan upanitasya chapunaha Sauchachamanadin karmaniyaman anabibhretan api sangshikshayad anushikshtena hi bhavyam pituhu putreneti.
Tasya, of him. Apihava, certainly. Atmajasya, of his son. Vipraha, the Brahmin father of Jad Bharat. Mad crazy Bharat. Putra Sneha, Anubadamanaha, who was obliged by affection for his son. Asama Arvartanat, until the end of the brahmachari ashram. Samskaran, the purificatory processes. Yata Upadesham, as prescribed in the Shastras. Vidadanaha, performing. Upanitasya, of one who has a sacred thread. Cha, also. Punaha, again. Shaucha Achamana Adin, practice of cleanliness, washing of the mouth, legs, and hands, etc. Karma Niyaman, the regulative principles of fruitive activities. Anibi Pretanapi, although not wanted by Jad Bharat. Sama Shikshayat, taught. Anushishtena, taught to follow the regulative principles. He, indeed. Avyam, should be. Pituhu, from the father. Putrena, the son. Iti, thus. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, HG Bhakti Swami Prabhupada. The Brahmin father's mind was always filled with affection for his son, Jad Bharat, Bharat Maharaj. Therefore, he was always attached to Jad Bharat. Because Jad Bharat was unfit to enter the Grihastha ashram, he simply executed the purificatory process up to the end of the brahmachari ashram. Although Jad Bharat was unwilling to accept his father's instructions, the Brahmin nonetheless instructed him in how to keep clean and how to wash, thinking that the son should be taught by the father. Purport. Jad Bharat was Bharat Maharaj in the body of a Brahmin, and he outwardly conducted himself as if he were dull, deaf, dumb, and blind. Actually, he was quite alert within. He knew perfectly well of the results of fruitive activity and the results of devotional service. In the body of a Brahmin, Maharaj Bharat was completely absorbed in devotional service within. Therefore, it was not at all necessary for him to execute the regulative principles of fruitive activity. As confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, Sanashtitasya Dharmasya Sangsiddhir Haritoshanam, Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 13. One has to satisfy Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the perfection of the regulative principles of fruitive activity. Besides that, it is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Dharma Svanastita Pumsang Vishvakshena Katasuyat Notpada Yadiratim Shama Evi Kevalam. Duties, dharma, executed by men regardless of occupation, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the Supreme Lord. Bhagavatam 128. These karma kanda activities are required as long as one has not developed Krishna consciousness. If one is developed in Krishna consciousness, there is no need to execute the prior regulative principles of karma kanda. Srila Madhavendra Puri said, "O regulative principles of karma kanda, please excuse me. I cannot follow all these regulative principles, for I am fully engaged in devotional service." He expressed the desire to sit somewhere beneath a tree and continue chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Consequently, he did not execute all the regulative principles. Similarly, Haridas Thakur was born in a Mohammedan family. From the very beginning of his life, he was never trained in the Karmakanda system. But because he was always chanting the holy name of the Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him as Namacharya, the authority in chanting the holy name. As Jad Bharat, Bharat Maharaj was always engaged in devotional service within his mind. Since he had executed the regulative principles continuously for 3 lives, he was not interested in continuing to execute them, although his Brahmin father wanted him to do so. Om Ganitavidandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshu Lanmalitamya Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karitavachalam Pangam Langa Tegadim Yakripatamaham Vande Shigurun Diditadanam Vancha Kapadirubhischa Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gauda Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama. All right, I'll read the translation again, one more time. The Brahmana father's mind was always filled with affection for his son, Jad Bharat Maharaj. Therefore, he was always attached to Jad Bharat. Because Jad Bharat was unfit to enter the Grihastha ashram, he simply executed the purificatory process up to the end of the Brahmacharya ashram. Although Jad Bharat was unwilling to accept his father's instructions, the Brahmin nonetheless instructed him in how to keep clean and how to wash, thinking that the son should be taught by the father. I'll just read text 5 because there's not a purport and it goes with this text 4. So tomorrow will be text 6. All right, so this is text 5. Jad Bharat behaved before his father like a fool, despite his father's adequately instructing him in Vedic knowledge. He behaved in that way so that his father would know that he was unfit for instruction and would abandon the attempt to instruct him further. He would behave in a completely opposite way. Although instructed to wash his hands after evacuating, he would wash them before. Nonetheless, his father wanted to give him Vedic instructions during the spring and summer. He tried to teach him the Gayatri mantra along with Omkar and Vyahriti, but after 4 months, his father still was not successful in instructing him. So here we're seeing that, of course, this is the third life of Bharat Maharaj. He first started out as Bharat Maharaj, renouncing his kingdom and going to the forest, and then he became attached to a, was it fawn? Is it? Dravida Prabhu? Yeah. Fawn, right? It became attached to a fawn, yeah. Attached to a fawn. After rescuing it from danger, right? The mother died. And then he rescued this fawn and became very attached. And then forgot about his spiritual life, forgot about his spiritual practices, which devotees have brought up in discussing this, that if he was in the association of other devotees, they would have said, "Hey, Prabhu, what's going on? You're falling into Maya here, But he wasn't in the association of the devotees, so therefore he, fell into illusion and became attached to this fawn. And that's the benefit of being in an ashram. That's why Srila Prabhupada would say that people should be in ashrams. Means brahmachari ashram means there's others around who could help us, who could help guide us. And in the Grihastha ashram, if one is married to a devotee, then they could also help each other. And if one's married to a non-devotee, then that might be difficult. And sometimes the difficulty is, just a side note, but sometimes the difficulty is that, like one of my friends, he married a devotee, but later she didn't want to be a devotee anymore. And she became like a fundamental Christian. I mean, she was like anti-Krishna. Up to the point she rather not this devotee even visit the temple. Of course, he still visits, but quite interesting. Of course, we also have our Bhakti Sundar Goswami, those of you who know him, but he told me that his wife, of course this happens with, men also not wanting to be devotees as well, but anyways, he told me that his wife one day, of course it was, probably, what do you call, something's festering in you, or, yeah. But the wife came up to him one day and said, so, you have to make a choice. Either me or Krishna. So then he said, Krishna. So then she said, okay, and then she took off. So eventually he took sannyas, so anyways. But if one is in the grihastha ashram and they're married to a devotee, then yeah, they're meant to help each other. Right, checks and balances. Right? But Bharat Maharaj, he wasn't with anyone. So there he fell into illusion. One of the reasons. And then he died thinking of this fun and became a deer, right? And he said he was performing, just eating dry leaves and not associated with the other deer, and then hanging out by the ashram, hearing the Krishna Katha, right? And then he died, and then he became Jad Bharat. So here we're in this chapter of Jad Bharat, and it's describing the supreme character of Jad Bharat, that he was born in an exalted family, a family of Brahmins, which means his father was a real Brahmin. He knew the principles of cleanliness and austerity and God consciousness and so on. And he was trying to teach Jad Bharat these principles, like we're hearing here, these principles of cleanliness. Whereas it's not some external thing, like we have some phobia or something, germ phobia, or cleanliness phobia or something. But it is, as the saying goes, cleanliness is next to godliness. And Srila Prabhupada said, cleanliness is godliness. He said if you stay dirty, Krishna will remain, I don't know what he said, 1 million miles away or something like that. He'll remain far away. So to be clean is necessary because it helps with our Krishna consciousness. It's a symptom of Krishna consciousness. So, Brahminical life. So he was trying to instruct his son, Jad Bharat, but Jad Bharat, although within it says he was extremely alert. In other words, he was sharp. He wasn't deaf, dumb, blind, any of this. But he was playing as he was, so he wouldn't be bothered. Just like the 4 Kumaras, young boys, Lord Brahma was instructing them, okay, get married. And they're saying, no, we don't want to do that. Brahma got upset, right? It said his eyebrows and then Lord Shiva came out. But the Kumaras didn't want to become involved in married life because they didn't want to run the risk of becoming entangled. They just wanted to direct spiritual life. So they just remained as young boys by their mystic power. So similarly, Jad Bharat, he didn't want to take any chances. he already became a deer, and he remembered that, and he didn't want to take any chances. So he was just acting as if he was deaf, dumb, blind, so people wouldn't bother him. It's actually, one devotee told me that, I think it was Tirthamar, she told me that that I believe it was Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but at one point he was acting as if he was sick to just stay within his, so people wouldn't bother him so much and he would just be absorbed in his chanting. So Jud Bharat, this is what he was doing. And his father was trying to instruct him, and it wasn't working. So, of course, in our particular lives, we may have to instruct people or try to train people. And I think in most cases it won't be that, somebody joins the ashram and they're like really sharp, but they're just acting like they can't be trained. I think in some cases certain people can't be trained in certain ways. Of course, Srila Prabhupada would say, for the temple life is there for people who can be trained. They should be trainable. But within our particular lives, we may be trying to train people in this way or that way, or we may be trying to maybe train ourselves or condition ourselves in certain ways to do certain services for Krishna. But over time, if we can't do it, we can't do it. In other words, if somebody's put into the kitchen and everything's burnt or everything's undercooked or overcooked or this or that, and the training they've been trying to train them for a long time. Okay, well, maybe the person's not a cook. Or same with management, or same with this, or same with that, right? But although a particular person may not be able to do some service, everybody could do some other type of service. So the idea is to find out what is that service and try to do that. And what is the point of all the service? What's the point of cleaning the floor? What's the point of distributing books? What's the point of worshiping the deities? What's the point of managing this and that? What's the point of all this? The point of all this is to please Hari, to please Krishna. That's the point. And to please the devotees. So again, we have to make sure that what we're doing is actually pleasing. And although it may be pleasing, it could be more pleasing and more pleasing and more pleasing. So we may be worshiping the deities and dressing them very nicely, but we could increase, right, in that. How we could dress them more nice, right, nicely. Or the amount of books we distribute, right? We can increase. And a lot of the times we put, like, what do you call it, the kind of glass ceilings? Means a certain, limitations. It means we put limitations on ourselves. Like Srila Prabhupada said, my disease is I cannot think small, as I think big. Or as Prabhupada would say sometimes, Krishna, because sometimes there's a worry about resources, about money, about resources. And Prabhupada would say, well, Krishna's not a poor man. He could supply, right? Bhoktaram Yagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He's the supreme proprietor. He could supply any amount of anything we need for preaching Krishna consciousness. So to think big, it's important to do that. Just like our Damodar Kumar Prabhu, who will be back in a few days, Monday. He was thinking to himself, I want to distribute 100 Bhagavad Gitas every day. That's what he was thinking, actually. And, of course, to distribute 100 Bhagavad Gitas every day it could be a little challenging. Find that many people to do it, right? But he managed to do it, twice. 100 Bhagavad Gitas in a day. what, or $500, collected or something. And the other days, he didn't distribute 100 Bhagavad Gitas, but he was trying for that, and he was getting at least close to that, and eventually he did it. So if we set high marks for ourselves, and actually the high mark is already set, we don't have to set it for ourselves. If we just strive for a high mark, then we may achieve that, or we get close to achieving that. But if we settle for something of a lower mark, then that's what we'll get, or we get lower. Just like I'm thinking of Shamasundar Prabhu. He was in jail for, I forgot what reason, but he explains in Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, his book. He was in jail, and while he was in jail, he was thinking, I want to spread Krishna consciousness. And he was thinking, what's the greatest way to spread Krishna consciousness? Okay, to influence important, famous people. Means materially, famous people. That's a great way. So he was thinking, yes, let's meet the Beatles. That's his idea, right? The band, old band Beatles. George Harrison, John Lennon. So he got out of jail, and they went to London, and that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to meet the Beatles, George Harrison, John Lennon. So they were making all types of prasadam, apple cake, apple pie, apple halva, because the record company was Apple, right? Apple Records. Anyways, eventually they get into some big party, Shamasundar, and he's there there's a bunch of people there, and all the famous Beatles, they're in the back rooms, and I mean at the time they were just some of the most famous people in the world. You see videos of them walking out, and there's like thousands of people, and you see the men weren't doing this, but the young girls were doing it. They'd walk out and they'd scream, ah, go crazy. They'd fall on the ground and stuff, literally. Even some men were? Really? All right. They're in ecstasy, seeing the Beatles. So, so that Shamasundar was there, and all the few of them devotees were there, and they're waiting for the George and John to come out. And then they came out, a few of the Beatles, and they kind of scanned the audience. They didn't say hi to most people. They just kind of made their way to the door. It's hard being famous, actually. Made their way to the door, and then George Harrison saw Shamasundar, dressed as a Hare Krishna, and then George Harrison walks up to Shamasundar. He said, "Oh, I've been looking for you guys, Hare Krishna." So then they spoke, and they talked, and eventually they make this record, and millions of people hear it throughout the world, and Hare Krishna mantra is spread throughout the world. Big Hare Krishna explosion there. So, but one of the reasons why this happened is because Shamasundar was thinking, and he was striving towards it. So that's an important thing. So, to find a service, and not everybody, we have to find a service that works for us, and then to engage in it and try to think big in relation to that service for the pleasure of Krishna. So, and then we have here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada's talking about this idea of not following the regulative principles. Now, this doesn't mean when someone becomes advanced, it's like, they don't follow the regulative principles or something like, the 4 rules and things like that. Hey, well, I'm advanced, I'm going to follow the 4 rules anymore. It means that, of course, it's it means that the service that is offered is it is spontaneous. It is spontaneous doesn't mean like, oh well, I live in a temple and I'm on the spontaneous level, so I do spontaneous service, once a month, and all the other time I'm, eating and sleeping or something. But spontaneous means full engagement. Means it's not that they're lazy fellows. Spontaneity doesn't mean laziness. It means they're spontaneously engaged all the time. It's natural. In other words, it's there's no force there. It's not like, hey, nor is there force from external, from oneself. Means people don't have to tell us, okay, hey, it's your turn to wash the pots, your turn to dress the deities. Nor is there any force internally. We don't have to force ourselves. Okay, I really don't want to do it, but all right, let me do it. I don't want to get up and dress the deities, or I don't want to go wash the pots. But anyways, let me just force myself. So it's just spontaneous. No one has to tell us to do it, nor do we have to push ourselves to do it. It just happens spontaneously. It means we're spontaneously inspired. And some of the, you could say, some of the external formalities may not be followed on that platform. Means the lesser important ones. Now, of course, until we reach that stage, we are advised to very strictly, follow all of the principles. So here it's mentioned about Haridas Thakur. That Haridas Thakur, he was born in a Mohammedan family. Now, of course, this is, when you talk about, low families, I mean, of course, if someone's born in a Mohammedan family, if they're to hear, oh, this is a low birth, they wouldn't like that. Actually, it's kind of, if you're born in a Muslim family, they think that to be born in a Hindu family is low. And if you're in a Hindu family, they think born in a Muslim family low. But the standard of the Srimad Bhagavatam is that any family that one is born in is considered a low family if there are certain cultural or moral principles that aren't followed, such as, for example, meat eating. So anyways, Haridas Thakur was born in a Mohammedan family, and especially at those times, and even nowadays, to be born in a non-Brahmin family and to be given some high spiritual position or authority in Krishna consciousness, or as Hinduism as people know it, it is considered to be like an offense to the culture. Like Srila Prabhupada was in South India one time, and South India, right, tend to be kind of strict and about certain, formalities and principles and culture. Even nowadays, actually in many ways to their credit, like they kicked one bogus guru out of South India practically. South Indian Brahmins down there got really upset with some New Age Indian-born bogus guru who was fooling around with some woman. He was supposed to be a sannyasi, but anyways, they kicked him out of South India practically. So, to their credit in many ways. But anyways, one time Srila Prabhupada was down there in South India, and he, some of these Brahmins that came up to him, and they were complaining to him. Why are you giving these Westerners Brahmin initiation, sannyas, and then you're initiating them, and then so on. And Srila Prabhupada began to argue with them based on scripture that it is by qualities, right? Chaturvarna maya shrishtam guna karma vibhagasha. So guna, qualities, and karma, work. So by qualities and by the work one does, one is considered to be a Brahmin or not a Brahmin. and so many other ones, so many other scriptural points. So Srila Haridas Thakur, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, although he was born in a non-Brahmin family, he elevated him to this position of Namacharya, which is absolutely amazing, specifically at that time, because there was, again, many people were upset with that. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, understanding, of course, Krishna himself, understanding the true nature of Dharma, the true nature of Krishna consciousness, he elevated him to Namacharya, the post. Means the authority in chanting the holy name. So Prabhupada makes a point here. In the beginning of his life, he was not trained in Brahminical principles, Namacharya Srila Haridas. But because he was always chanting the holy name of Krishna, he was elevated to that position. So we may not have been trained, and actually most people aren't trained, even in India. I mean, they're really, the culture is really being lost. Of course, there's remnants of it, and in some places you actually have people who are training people, but there's a huge lack of training in India. And also now just the meat industry is just really, Indians are really falling off in that regard, which you bring meat in, meat eating in, and that just corrupts everything. First it's meat, then it's everything else. So we may not have been trained. In many cases, we haven't been. But if we engage seriously in chanting the holy name and in the process of Krishna consciousness, we can be elevated in Krishna consciousness to the point of initiation, second initiation, and so on. And Srila Prabhupada, he commented on this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which we'll end with here. This is in the section of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu going to South India, which is quite interesting, because eventually he meets Ramananda Roy. And when he meets Ramananda Roy there, he sees Ramananda Roy. First of all, of course, he's Krishna himself, so he recognizes who Ramananda Roy is, but there was no formal introduction that this is Ramananda Roy. He recognized him without even formally being introduced. But there was all these Brahmins around, all these South Indian Brahmins. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Ramananda Roy was externally as a Shudra. So anyways, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a sannyasi. He just went up to Ramananda Roy and they embraced each other. They started crying, and because he connected with his devotee, great devotee Ramananda Roy. But then, seeing these South Indian Brahmins kind of, their eyes were probably really big, and what is this sannyasi doing? Then he restrained himself, and then they just met in the evening. They have those wonderful discussions that are described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But before that, he meets Korma Brahman, and he also meets this Vasudev. And Vasudev had leprosy. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he cured him of this leprosy. And this is from Madhya Lila, Chapter 7, the Lord's Tour of South India, text 148, which Srila Prabhupada is commenting what we've been discussing a little bit in this purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is the verse, and it's a short purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also advised Vasudeva to preach about Krishna and thus liberate living entities. As a result, Krishna would very soon accept him as his devotee. Purport. Although Vasudeva Vipra was a leper and had suffered greatly, still, after Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cured him, he instructed him to preach Krishna consciousness. Indeed, the only return the Lord wanted was that Vasudeva preach the instructions of Krishna and liberate all human beings. That is the process of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So he cured the leper, right, Vasudeva, he cured him, and he said, preach Krishna consciousness. And then Srila Prabhupada says, that is the process of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And then here's a important highlighted here. Each and every member of this society was rescued from a very abominable condition. Now someone may think, oh, I wasn't in an abominable condition and I was happy, this and that. But that's not the fact. Srila Prabhupada says here, every member of this society was rescued from a very abominable condition. So we should take it as fact, what Srila Prabhupada is saying. Every member was rescued for a very abominable condition. But now they are engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness. They are not only cured of the disease called materialism, but are also living a very happy life. So they're cured and they're living a very happy life. Right? Devotees live a happy life. Everyone accepts them as great devotees of Krishna, and their qualities are manifest in their very faces. If one wants to be recognized as a devotee by Krishna, he should take to preaching work. So if we want to be recognized by Krishna, we should take to preaching work. So book distribution, right? Harinam, book distribution, Harinam, book distribution, Harinam. Other things, right? Social media platforms, this way, that, writing. Being a great host when people come to the temple. Not like somebody comes to the temple for a month and nobody talks to them or something, Immediately talking to new people, trying to be friendly, giving them prasadam. If one wants to be recognized as a devotee by Krishna, he should take to preaching work, following the advice of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then one will undoubtedly attain the lotus feet of Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Lord Krishna himself, without delay. So then someone may wonder, oh, but it's so difficult. People are, so we're in the West, right? It's so difficult. This is one of the capitals of Kali, right? It's true, it is, but maybe we should pack up and go to India. People seem to be very receptive there. It's true, people are receptive there. Some people. Or maybe we should just pack up and, close up the temple and stop trying because it's so difficult. One, it's difficult for people to become Krishna conscious, or for us to spread Krishna consciousness. And two, it just made me difficult for us to maintain our Krishna consciousness, right? Oh man, it's like a lot of, Maya here, and she's just surrounding us on all fronts, and what are we supposed to do, So Prabhupada comments in the previous verses in text 129 in relation to this. So it's a verse and short purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu further advised the Brahman karma, if you follow this instruction, means to preach Krishna consciousness, your materialistic life at home will not obstruct your spiritual advancement. Because Korma Brahman wanted to take off, leave his home, go with Mahaprabhu. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you stay here, Yadidakataka Krishna Badesh, and you instruct everybody and try to liberate them. He says, try to liberate them. Indeed, if you follow these regulative principles, we will again meet here. Or, rather, you will never lose my company. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu is there where the preaching spirit is strongly thriving. He's there. They're there. Purport. This is an opportunity for everyone. If one simply follows the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu under the guidance of his representative and chants the Hare Krishna mantra, teaching everyone as far as possible the same principle, the contamination of the materialistic way of life will not even touch him. It does not matter whether one lives in a holy place like Vrindavan, Navadvip, or Jagannath Puri, or in the midst of European cities where the materialistic way of life is very prominent. Here it's very prominent as well, right? San Diego. If a devotee follows the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he lives in the company of the Lord. Wherever he lives, he converts that place into Vrindavan and Navadvip. This means that materialism cannot touch him. This is the secret of success for one advancing in Krishna consciousness. So, in conclusion, Jad Bharat here, he is acting as if he was deaf, dumb, blind, to avoid getting entangled in any way, shape, or form. But he's actually a completely realized soul, which will become more clear in the following verses. And his father's trying to train him, but it's not working so well. And again, yeah, we may try to train ourselves or train others, but we're all able to do certain services, so we should find that service and know it's for the pleasure of Krishna. And even though we may have not been thoroughly trained or trained in great families, we can also become qualified and try to. And again, yeah, we've been saved, right, from a very abominable condition. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is just asking for us to return the favor, to try to help others be Krishna conscious. And we could do that. It's not impossible. It's very possible. And we should try for that and know that we will be protected, as Srila Prabhupada is bringing up in that point, if we strictly observe, chanting and so on. All right, does anybody have any question or comment?
Well, suppose I'm living in the temple and I'm very serious about my Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be distracted by having to wash pots or clean the temple or have Bhakti Tyler or Balaram or the Swami telling me to do anything. So I'll just be inept. At whatever you ask me to do, I'll just do backwards. So you'll leave me alone and I can think about Krishna. I'm just following Jad Bharat. What's the problem? I don't want you bothering me while I'm thinking about Krishna. So I'll just be a failure and you'll leave me alone. What do you think?
All right. Yeah, one devotee mentioned that, something like that to me one time. He said, "Well, you got to be careful, because if you do some service really well, they're going to continue and ask you to do it, So, but if you mess something up, then there's, all right, well, kind of. But a devotee like bhakti, it means activity. It means to be active, for Krishna. Like Srila Prabhupada would say, or he said one time, that when Krishna was speaking to Arjuna on the battlefield, right, they're in their chariot together. So Krishna didn't tell Arjuna that, "Oh, Arjuna, you sit here and you smoke ganja, and I'll fight for you." Prabhupada said that. But he said that you have to fight, and then I'll help you. So there's Srila Prabhupada, or as Srila Prabhupada, I read this quote the other day from Srila Prabhupada. He said that somebody wrote him this idea about how can we repay you, Srila Prabhupada? And Srila Prabhupada said, well, the fact is you can never repay the spiritual master. No matter how hard you try, you cannot repay. But if you want to try to repay me, then you should preach vigorously, like me. In that way, you could try to repay me, which is a very interesting comment. Srila Prabhupada said that, because it's not that you should just preach vigorously. That's what Srila Prabhupada said. He didn't say just vigorously, but he said vigorously like me. I was like, oh, that's as far as possible, right? Of course, Prabhupada is, So yeah, we want to be a devotee means to be active in the different processes, devotional service, and laziness and inactivity doesn't have any room really in a devotee's life. So they should always be engaged, and yeah, they shouldn't follow this idea of Jad Bharat that, okay, I'll just act like I'm incapable so I could just but they should, be engaged. So I don't know.
You convinced me. I'm back on board.
Okay. You're welcome. All right, does anybody have any other comment or question? Hare Krishna. All right. Okay, Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.